Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Tony, Basement Blues. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Ken?
I am doing very well. I am super excited to have you here. But before we talk about why you're here, Tony, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You've been collecting movies and TV shows since 1986, back when you bought your first VCR. Um, you currently have over 8,700 movies and TV shows in the collection. And you can see the collection right there in the background, which is so epic. So before we go on, I got to know, do you go in alphabetical order or how do you organize?
Yeah, so definitely alphabetical order. With such a large collection, if you don't alphabetize, you can't find anything. But I do have everything grouped off in different sections. So I'll keep like all my Kino Lorber stuff together, all my Scream Factory stuff. So everything's in different groups, but they're all alphabetized.
That's all. Do you also go by genre or just all?
No, that would be too much.
I figured. Why
Yeah.
would you do have a background in doing such though. You did work at a video store during the 90s, loved interacting with people as they came into the store, which I was blessed. My mom and dad owned a mom and pop video store. So, I grew up in a video store as well. So I know how much fun it is to sit in there and talk to people. And then you decided, you know what, we're going to do the YouTube channel back in 2012 to share your collection, see what was going on physical media, and find like your own clique of people, your own group of people that had the same like-minded thing as you do. And as we all know, once you start doing this, you do make a lot of great friends. So,
Mhm.
what gave you the drive to finally be like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start the channel.
Yeah, well, back in 2012, there really wasn't very many people doing this kind of thing. And so, I'm thinking there's got to be other people out there that like to physically collect movies, not only just watch movies, but actually add them to the collection. And I didn't really see very many people doing that on YouTube at that time. I think Wet Movie One, Cool Duder, different people I saw, John Flickster, but not too many other ones. I thought, hey, I've got some things I would like to people for people to see, things that they may not be aware of. So I just turned on my camera and started filming things that I would pick up.
See, and what I love about that is you're still able to discuss this because of the amount of movies that you have, and obviously physical media, there's always more coming out, so you're always
Mm,
able to keep going and keep showing off what you got. And your VHS collection is also pretty badass. So
right.
do you still VHS hunt to this day?
No, definitely not. I don't do VHS hunting. Now, if I do come across something, if I'm in a thrift store or a yard sale and I see something that I haven't seen before or don't have, then I might snatch it up. But I'm really big on getting the most pristine copy of something. If it looks worn down and things, I don't usually get those. But if it looks like it's brand new, then I really go after it.
That's awesome. So what's the biggest thing that you are about collecting now?
Um, Pretty much anything. I don't do the VHS tapes, but I do like getting all the new releases that I can get. If it has a slipcover, I go after those first. I do collect steel books. Mostly the videos I do on my channel currently are steelbook unwrappings so that people can see what they would be purchasing. But if it doesn't have a slipcover, I usually hold off on those until there's a sale. But if it has a slipcover, I'm really after the slips.
Okay. Well, and the good thing is, guys, if you haven't checked it out already, I have all of Tony's links down in the description. So make sure you're following on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel so you can become a part of that family as well. So, man, with a collection that big, you got to have a lot of horror movies in there. And
I
in order for
do.
you to be a horror movie fan, Tony, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now
Yes.
I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Tony, the first horror movie you watched was.
The Amityville Horror is the one that comes to mind back in the 70s.
I
I really
still
loved that
love that
one,
movie.
reading the book and everything when I was in elementary school. And then for there to be a TV movie, for there to be a big theatrical movie of it, I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the story. If you think about the Amityville Horror, it's not a really scary story, but I love the haunted house theme. Growing up, we used to always go to the JC's haunted house in our local town. And so when I saw a movie about a haunted house, I really wanted to check that out. And my parents were all up for that. They didn't mind me watching scary movies. So I really enjoyed that film.
And it's not a film that's full of blood and guts and
Right.
nudity. You know, it's one of those films that is just anxiety,
Yep.
dread, and horror.
Psychological type thing.
Right. So, I know you said you were quite young when you seen it for the first time, but do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen Amityville Horror?
Yeah, I was 10 years old. Yeah, so it came out
Man,
in 1979. And I do remember seeing bits and pieces of other horror movies growing up, but that was the one that really got me to wanting to watch
mhm,
more horror.
yeah. And you said you did watch it with your parents for the first time, correct?
Yes,
So, like, was this like their like gateway, like trying to dip your toes in the water to see how you would do with horror, or were they not really big horror fans?
you're not really. We as a family, we would always go to the drive-in, and I always remember we'd all go see the Disney movies and different things. But one time, there wasn't really anything else playing, and they had the Amityville Horror playing, and my mom and dad said, "Hey, you kids are." I have a twin brother, and I also have an older brother, just 13 months older than us. And so we said, "Hey, yeah, we can handle a scary movie," and so that's what we ended up seeing.
Man, and like I said, the movie still holds up to this day. I still love this movie. I love Brolin in this movie. He does such a fantastic job. But do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most from the Amityville Horror?
Yeah, I do remember them going down into the basement and breaking down the brick wall and seeing that red room in the background and how eerie that was. And then also with the flies in the room upstairs, and then also um them looking out the window and seeing Jody for the first time with those red glowing eyes. It was always freaky. So there's so different little bitty elements throughout the movie that kind of sticks out. But I really
Yeah,
enjoyed that. Plus, watching George Lutz's character kind of going from a loving new husband and stepfather, and how his demeanor and everything just kind of changed, and how cold and isolated he became was really interesting to me.
when he actually hits her in this movie.
Yes.
Like that's something that like that was a big deal. Like even as a kid watching it, you were like, "Oh shit, he hit her."
Right.
Like that's dad. He's not supposed to do that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
to see something like that on this film too, this really is a family drama wrapped up in a horror film, and I think those
Mhm.
are the best horror films because you
Oh yeah,
love every
definitely.
character in this movie.
Yeah. And thinking about, thinking about what you just said about him striking her, back in the 70s, you kind of saw stuff like that because the not that it was right or anything, but it was more abuse that you didn't really know of, and people openly abused others without thinking about it. But times have definitely changed since then. Um, but yeah, I thought that's a good thought that you just put out there, how that was displayed at the movies. But a lot of that happened back in the 70s.
Sure, it was a lot more. Uh, it was more socially acceptable back then than it is now. I
Doesn't
mean,
mean that
even
it was
in
right though.
right, right. Oh, absolutely. Violence against a human being is never right, especially someone that
Right.
you're supposed to be in love with. So, um, we talked about the scenes that affected you the most, and there's a lot of great scenes that you could choose from this movie. But do you remember what your favorite scene from the film is? Maybe a scene that stuck with you a little more than others that you would consider your favorite?
Yeah, just like when the priest walked in and just hearing that voice. So when the priest comes into the house, there's nobody around. He's looking to see where the family is, and just hearing that voice get out, and how disturbed he was, and how deathly sick he got, really stands out in my mind.
And
It almost put me in the mind of The Exorcist in a way,
yeah,
the way that the priest was involved. At this point, when I saw this film, I hadn't seen The Exorcist yet. But when I saw The Exorcist, that really came to my mind.
right. And like you said, these two definitely um, go hand in hand with each other, especially for being back then, seeing a possession in a way. This
Hmm.
one goes a little bit deeper into the mythos, I think. But it's still a movie that I would still liken to The Exorcist or The Omen in the way that it,
Hmm.
affects people in that way, especially in a family type of atmosphere. So, um, you don't get a lot of kills in this movie because we usually talk about, what kill
Right.
affects you the most. You don't really get a lot of that. And that's
No,
what
not at all.
yeah, I love about this movie. You don't have that to scare you. You have the dread of who could die
Hmm.
in the movie that really, really affects you. But I I got to ask this question because the Amityville Horror is a part of a franchise. So
Hmm.
whenever we talk about franchise films, I always ask, which film in the Amityville Horror franchise would be your absolute favorite?
Yeah. So to be shockingly honest, I've only seen the original Amityville Horror as far as that franchise is concerned, but I did watch the remake that Ryan Reynolds did, which I really enjoyed that one. Also, I liked that there were some differences between the two films, but very similar, a lot of similarities between them. But that's the only other Amityville Horror film I've seen is the Ryan Reynolds reboot.
It's the only other one you really need to see.
Yeah. I've got all the other ones
Yeah.
in the collection, but I've just never watched them.
I don't know. They were never really my thing. And I do agree with you. I love the Amityville Horror remake.
Hmm.
I think that they were able, like you said, to do different things. They were able to update certain things to make them a little bit scarier. The things they did with Jody, I feel like were a
Right.
lot scarier,
Yes.
but it still stayed true to the bones of what the
Hmm.
original Amityville Horror was. And um, again, I'm a huge fan of the original and the remake. These are both fantastic movies that are both very well made. And the fear of the movie is, when you see the loved one that is too far gone, you think, and how are you
Hmm.
going to bring them back? So I
Right.
love that exploration of that as well. And I was going to ask you if you had seen the remake, and
Hmm.
since this did get a remake, it was, what was it, 2005? I want to say was the
Yeah, something
remake.
like that.
So we've had a little bit of time there. Is this something you would like to see them try to continue today, or do you think this is like
No,
a let's let
I
a
think,
sleeping dog lie?
yeah, definitely. To me, the original's my favorite, and I do enjoy the remake, but I do not think there's any reason to go any further with that franchise.
Well, now we've got like the Amityville Karen and like
Oh yeah, I've never seen any of that stuff.
Amityville
Speaking
in
speaking of
space.
cool
Yeah, all that shit.
Cool Duder, he likes to do those off the kill sequels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and those are some doozies.
yeah,
So,
I'm
uh,
sure.
so we've talked about your first horror movie being the Amityville Horror and what that means to you. But here for a second, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you.
Hmm.
My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Tony?
Hmm.
What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
To me, it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. I really love that one. That's another one that I saw real young. To me, that is a terrifying movie because of such brutality with the kills and the stalking and everything that happened in that film. It's just one of my all-time favorites.
And it still holds up so well today because I feel like it's more of an like I feel like if that movie came out today, it would
Hmm.
be an A24 film.
Right.
Like
Hmm.
it's a total art film. The art design, the props, everything in that movie is so well done. And I don't even look at that movie as a slasher. As the
Right.
franchise goes, I think it becomes more
Hmm.
slasher as it goes. But that first film, I kind of look at like Hellraiser. Like it was not really a slasher, and
Right.
Leatherface isn't in it all that much. It's just the fear that you get from that movie is just with how
Yeah.
so terrifying that family is. You know,
Hmm.
the Sawyers or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
them back then, like
Hmm.
it's just a terrifying movie. And I'm really glad that you brought that movie up because I absolutely adore that movie as well. I think it's one of the
Yeah.
best horror movies ever made.
I love the way that they shot that film. It's so documentary type style, and plus the fact that just the simpleness of the story and the Sawyer house, the farmhouse. When you go inside that house, you feel eerie. Just the way that things are laid out, um, chickens all throughout the house, and the meat hooks, and then when you see the family for the first time and grandpa, man, that
Yeah.
is very creepy.
Rumor has it Grandpa was the best at killing.
Yes. Yeah.
So man, again, I've had an amazing time talking to you about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, talking to you about the Amityville Horror. Now, these two movies, like I said, they both really, they came out in the 70s and they both had remakes in the 2000s. There's
Hmm.
a lot of similarities in these movies. And they're two movies that I think that we could even go back today and talk about how important they are still and
Hmm.
the impact they've made on the genre. I mean, you wouldn't have probably half of the slasher movies you have without Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the Amityville Horror really helped to bring the how do I want to say it, the based on a true story haunted house
Right.
effect to real life, to
Right.
bring
Exactly.
that to the film. So both these movies have really etched their place in history. So to be able to talk about them with you is super amazing and super cool. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to the Amityville Horror. And what we're going to do, Tony, is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. All we're doing is ranking Amityville Horror on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, zero skulls being not effective,
Hmm.
five being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Jason or Tony, what would your ranking of Texas Chainsaw or of Amityville Horror? Jeez, my brain is all over the place with this sickness. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's
What
okay.
would your ranking of the Amityville Horror be?
Definitely at least a 3.5. As a child, to me, it still holds up. 3.5 would definitely be my ranking.
Yeah, because it's one of those ones too that, like I said, it really when you think about this movie, and that is another thing with this and Texas Chainsaw Massacre that they have in common. We thought, I mean, Amityville Horror does have its roots in reality.
Hmm.
The Lutz family. What happened with the DeFeos before them. There is that reality there, but this really took that and what the fiction of it can be,
Hmm.
fictionalizing real events and heightening them to an extreme. And they still piggyback on that today. So let me ask you this though, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre obviously was inspired by real events with the Ed Gein stuff, and then
Right.
Amityville Horror was based on a true story with the DeFeos and the Lutzes. Do you think that when you hear a story that is like that, especially that's based on a true story or inspired by real events, do you think that that ups the horror of the film for an audience?
Definitely, to me, it does. I'm a big true crime fan. I love true crime. I love watching all the documentaries, all these things. To me, knowing that a film is based off of actual events makes me really enjoy the film more, just for the fact that you have things that you can research afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, and that this is something that could really happen to a family or to a person really ups the scare factor for me.
And I feel the same way. And I would have never known about the DeFeos or the Lutzes if it wasn't for this
Right.
movie. Like, and then doing the research on the house and the events that happened at the house, and
Hmm.
how the Lutzes never went back for their stuff. They just left. They were
Right.
gone. It was too much. Um, Obviously, none of us will ever really know what happened in that house with the Lutzes and the DeFeos. We had the
Right.
fictionalized tales, we had the news stories and stuff like that, but there's nothing scarier than what happens in our imagination.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yes.
to see these movies and then let your mind wonder on what could have actually happened to these families. Unfortunately, with the DeFeos, a much worse outcome. Obviously, with
Right.
Ronnie DeFeo, and
Right.
uh, it's a heartbreaking story of a young man that whether it
Yeah.
was an addiction that took it or whatever, there was still people that lost their lives in that story.
Yeah.
So it's just I agree with you. I think that once you hear, something like this really happened, it really ups your and it makes you feel more for the characters too.
It does.
You really get that bond because that's based on somebody that really went through this type of thing. So
Hmm.
man, I'm glad that you think that way because I completely agree with you.
Right. And just a thought on that, the with the speaking about the DeFeos, and then you talk about the Lutz family. If you do more research on the Lutz family, was it fictionalized? Did they exaggerate? Did they do this for notoriety? Those are things that you can think about because most people say that what the Lutz told was not accurate, but
Right.
we know for sure that what happened with the DeFeos was actual events. So yeah, people can take advantage of different stories, news stories and such, but still the way that the movie plays out was still extraordinary for me.
I agree, and then you get the Conjuring series with Ed and Lorraine Warren,
Exactly. Hmm.
and a lot of the fictionalization of what they did. And they go back to the DeFeo story with The
Right.
Conjuring,
Hmm.
so it is such an epic thing to see these things. And, the terror, that's real life horror to me. This isn't Freddy Krueger where I know, yeah, some,
Right.
genius came up
Right.
with this idea and went there. But this has happened unfortunately to a real family, and I think that ups the ante. And like you're talking about, whether it's fictionalized or not, they went
Yeah,
through something.
they did. Right.
So,
Yeah.
I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, make sure you're following Tony on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, clicking that notification bell. That way you get updates on all the new videos that he's putting out. I promise you're not going to regret it. Tony, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help build the channel more than you know. And follow SledgeHammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.